I'm on my desktop and I want to create a new Rails application. So how do I do that? Well, we first want to go into our terminal here, and I like keeping all of my projects in one directory. So I normally have a Rails folder here. So what I'll do is just do a cd Rails and see that I have nothing in here. And the command that we will need to put in to create a new application is Rails new and then the application name. In my case, I'm going to call it foodback, so it's just a play on words. Instead of calling it food feedback or restaurant feedback, I decided just to kind of mesh two words together and call it foodback. You can call it whatever you'd like, it's totally up to you. Or you can call it foodback as well, just so that you can copy it, copy what I'm doing on screen, exactly what I'm doing on screen. And one thing that we don't want to forget is the minus capital T sign. And what this does is it skips all of the testing framework. So it doesn't create any of those testing folders or files. Because we won't be covering any sort of testing in this course, there's really no point in having Rails generate those folders, because we want to keep our Rails project as clean as possible, as slim as possible, just to maximize the efficiency. So once we do that, we can just hit enter and it'll go through, and you can see it'll create all sorts of folders and files here. It'll run a bundle install and install all of the default gems that come with Rails. And then once it's done doing that, you'll see that if you do an ls, you'll see that foodback has been created. So I'll just cd into that. And for me, I'm going to open it up in Sublime. So I have a command here that'll let me open it up in Sublime. If you're new to programming, you don't have a text editor of choice, I would highly recommend Sublime Text. It is very user-friendly, and the graphics, the colors and whatnot look very, very nice. So if you don't have anything, use Sublime Text. Otherwise, use whatever text editor you're used to. So in here, actually in a terminal, let's do this. I like to always keep two, at least at the minimum, two terminal windows open. And that's because one of these I'll continue to run the Rails server while I do all of my work in the other window. And you'll see that our server is up and running now, so we can just go into Google Chrome. Default host is localhost 3000, and now we're taken to our default Rails homepage. We don't have any root paths defined, so this is what Rails just gives us out of the box. One of the first things that I like to do is create a migration file, and that's to put together kind of our architecture, if you think about it that way, where we have all of our models and create all of the relations to those models. And so what I do here is do Rails G migration initial schema. So this will create a migration file, at which point I can just go in here and start creating some tables here. Now, let's think about this for a little bit. So we're going to have a few different things, right? We're going to have a restaurant, we're going to have users, and those users are going to be able to post reviews of those restaurants. So we've got kind of three things going on there. So let's start off with the easiest one. So we'll do create table restaurants, do t end it, and what do we need here? We need a name, text is description, and the only difference between a string, you'll want to use a string field if it's something that you expect to only be on one field, so probably a maximum of 255 characters, but it's really just one line type of information. And then you'll want to use text if it's, think about it as a text area, where you can have multiple lines. It could probably be a paragraph, probably a few paragraphs. So that's the difference between a string and a text here. Then we can do, let's see, what else do we want here? We want address, right? We want some contact information. Just one, address 2, city, state, zip code. let's just add in here some contact information, even more with the phone and email. I'll align this up too so that it looks a little bit better. All right, save it there. And now let's do a reviews table, right? Because we'll need some reviews right here. So we'll say a rating. Actually, first let's do comments, and then integer would be our rating. So like a 1 to 5 star or something like that. And I think that'll be good enough for now for reviews. What we'll do later on in the course is to create a relation here and add some indexes here so that when you're on a restaurant, it will be indexed with a review, and we'll talk more about that later. So now let's create users we'll save for later because we'll actually be using a gem to do all of our user creation. So we'll be using the device gem, so we'll cover that later. So we'll leave the users out for now. But one thing I can think of, we'll just do it now, is to create some categories. So we could have put categories here in the restaurants if we really wanted to. But the problem with that is that every time you create a restaurant, you'll be creating a category and you're saving it every time you create a new restaurant record. Whereas here in the categories table, you can have one category name and then tie that back to a restaurant. So you're really just creating those categories one time and then just relating it back to the restaurant. So we could have saved it here, but I think it's probably a little bit better and more, I suppose, correct in creating a separate categories table, because then it allows you to have a little bit more flexibility. So here are the 3 tables that I think are good enough for now. Again, we'll create the users table later. So what we can do is do rake db migrate and actually run this migration. And if we go into our schema, you'll see that it created all of these models for us. So there we have it. We created a new Rails application, and we created the initial schema, the initial kind of database, or all of the initial models and their attributes. Now in the next video, we'll have the home page be more than just this generic home page, and we'll start setting up some controllers and their views.